A few miles from London, a small village in 1847, Wick Hollow. Stone paths, fog peeking through thick trees in the morning, and an old church whose bell rang only once a day. It was the place where time stopped. There lived a young artist on the edge of the village, Edward Henry. The window of his room was always open so that the light could come in. Edward believed that light is the language of God, and color is his word. He made the faces of the people of the town all day long, but his images were always incomplete. One day, when the mist had subsided, he went to the hill where the whole village could be seen. There was a young woman there, Elaine, in a light white dress, with her hair waving in the wind. She looked like she was out of a painting. She was the daughter of the wealthiest family in the village, but in her eyes was a loneliness greater than wealth. Edward saw him for the first time and the world stood still. He didn't say anything. He just kept that moment on his canvas. And the days passed. Ella often came to see Edward's weaving pictures secretly and began to understand his silence. No word was spoken between them, only eyes, light and color spoke. But the people of Wick Hollow did not like this quiet relationship. A girl from a rich family and a poor painter. This was against the norms of the time. Edward started making the biggest painting of his life. The girl in the mist, the girl standing in the fog, who may have always been her, but never really. Ella disappeared one day before the painting was completed. He said he had a relationship with a London lord, and the church bell rang twice that evening. For the first time, the second time for someone's broken heart, Edward did not finish the painting. He placed only a small stone in the mist, where he saw her for the first time. Autumn had descended on Wick Hollow. The leaves on the trees were turning yellow and red, as if nature itself were telling Edward's heart. It had been 6 months since Ella had left, but her scent still lingered in Edward's room. Every morning he sat in front of his unfinished painting. He took the brush in his hand, but no paint was applied to the canvas. Only blurred lines, like memories, which fade with time but do not disappear. One day Edward received a letter from London. The words were few, but the burden was heavy. I am well, but my heart has remained where light and silence used to meet. Ella? Edward read the letter over and over again. Then he made a decision. He would not let the love he had for Ella perish, even if he himself perished. The next day he gathered the children of the village. He began to teach them painting. He told them that beauty is not only in the face, but also in the waiting. The villagers, who had once thought him mad, now called him a teacher. Years passed. Ella lived in a magnificent house in London, but her eyes had the same mist that hung over the mountains of Wick Hollow. She often looked out the window, as if searching for a scene that was alive only in her heart. Then one day the news came. Edward's health had deteriorated. He lay in his little hut on the edge of the village. Looking out the window at the empty sky, a village boy asked him, "Master Edward, why don't you paint now?" Edward smiled and said, "I haven't run out of paint. I've run out of time." That night, a gentle rain began to fall in the sky. And in the morning, when the light came in through the window, Edward had fallen asleep eternally before his canvas, the same canvas on which was still the same fog, in which Ella stood and finished, but eternal. 50 years had passed. Wick Hollow was no longer the same. The horse-drawn carriages had been replaced by steam engines. The cobblestone streets were now graveled, but over the hill, where Edward had once painted, the fog still hung there. In a large London bungalow sat an old woman, Ella Harper. Her hair was silver, her hands were wrinkled, and on the table in front of her was the same letter she had last written to Edward. Time had changed everything, but a picture still lived in her heart, a picture that was never finished. One day she decided she would go back to the village, where her love had taught her to play with the colors of life. She arrived at Wick Hollow by train. The village now had new buildings, but the church was still the same. She took the path to the hill, where Edward's cottage had once been. The cottage was now dilapidated, but there was a single painting on the wall. The girl in the mist, the same painting that Edward had left unfinished. But now something had changed in it. Ella went closer and looked. A new color had been added to the edge of the canvas, a pale blue, as if someone had imprisoned her aging eyes. Below was a faint signature, "For the day she returns." Ella's tears began to flow. She sat in the chair, looking up at the sky, where the faint light of the sun was reflecting in the clouds. Exactly the light, as Edward used to say, "This is the language of God." A few days later, the villagers found another silence at the cottage door. Ella was still sitting in the chair, but her eyes were closed. She had a brush in her hand and light blue spots on her fingers. That day the church bell at Wick Hollow rang twice, once for Edward, once for Ella. It is said that sometimes when the fog is thick, two shadows appear on the hill, a painter and a girl, forever imprisoned in the colors of silence.
In the north of Canada, there was a small village, Lake Haven. The winters there were so long that people often took warmth from their memories. A girl named Anna lived with her grandmother in a wooden house. Every evening she went to the lake shore and listened to the faint sound of water trapped under the ice. One day she found a small box there. Inside was an old photo of a soldier and a letter. "If I don't return, let the ice tell my story." The next day, Anna asked the elders of the village, and they told her that the soldier was from their own village, and he never returned. After that day, whenever the ice melted, Anna went to the lake and said, "You've come back? I heard your message." The whole village said. When Anna spoke, a voice came from under the ice, as if someone was replying. In a small village of England, Hamley, an old woman, Rosa, ran a tea house. The special thing about her tea house was that she placed a rose with every cup. People said that the rose brought good luck. One day a young painter came, lonely, quiet, and penniless. Rosa smiled and said, "Don't worry about money. Just paint me a picture of my shop." A few days later, the picture was ready. Birds sitting outside the shop, rose petals wet with rain. And in the corner of the painting was written, "Tea ends, but its fragrance remains." 5 years later, when Rosa died, her tea house closed, but that painting still hangs in a cafe in London, where people say the scent of those roses is still there. In the rural area of America, Moon Valley, there was an old house. People called it the House of Shadows. They said at night an old lantern glowed there, though no one lived inside. A young couple, Emily and Ben, bought that house. The first night, when they slept, Emily heard a faint knock at the door. She opened it. No one was there, but a note lay on the ground. "This house stays silent, only when memories do not awaken." A few days later, they found an old diary inside the wall. It told the story of a woman who died waiting for her husband. Emily burned the diary, but since that day, the lantern has never gone out. People still say, when the wind blows in Moon Valley, that woman still calls her husband. In the middle of an old village stood a large oak tree. The villagers called it the Tree of Hope. Every year, people tied their wishes to it on paper. But one year, lightning struck and broke the tree. The villagers cried, as if their hopes had broken too. Then a little boy said, "The tree has fallen, not died. I'll make new branches grow." Years later, the tree stood again, and a plaque was hung on it. Hope never dies, it only changes its form. In an old Chinese village, Yangli, there was a poor boy, Chulin, who sat by the river every evening making paper boats. His mother used to say, "When your boat crosses the river, your destiny will change too." One day, a merchant came, picked up one of the boats, and said, "You have lucky hands, my boy. Come with me to the city." Chulin took his mother's permission and went to the city. Years later, that boy became a great artist. His paintings of paper boats became famous. When he returned to the village, the river had dried up, but a small boat was stuck at the bank. On it was written, "My son, your boat has reached its destination." In a mountain village of Japan, Kamagachi, cherry blossom, sakura, trees bloomed every spring. There was a girl, Yumi, whose father had gone to war. Before leaving, he said, "When the sakura petals fall, I will return." Years passed, every spring came, but her father didn't. Yumi tied a red ribbon to the tree every year. After 25 years, one day she found that same ribbon on the ground. With it, a small wooden box containing a soldier's photo and a note. I couldn't return, but every spring I bloomed with your tree. After that, Yumi built a bench under the tree, and on it was written, "Love doesn't die with time, it only changes shape." In the desert region of Australia outback, there was a boy, Liam. His grandfather was a star expert. He used to say, "Every mark on the sand is the reflection of a star, only if you know how to see it." One night, Liam saw a falling star land on the ground. He ran and found a small glowing stone. He called it the sand star. As time passed, Liam used that light to teach astronomy to children. Years later, when he grew old, he looked at the sky and said, "Grandpa, I've kept the stars alive on Earth." After his death, a small observatory was built there, named the Sand Star, where every night a lamp burns as if a star has descended to Earth. In the old Moroccan city of Fez, the streets were filled with fragrance of roses, oud, and saffron. There lived a girl, Zahra, who sold perfumes. She had an old bottle about which she said, "My grandfather got it from a desert sage. It brings peace to every sorrowful heart." One day, a tired traveler came, his eyes weary, his heart heavy. Zahra opened the bottle, and in a moment, the air filled with the scent of rain and oud. The traveler smiled as if his heart felt light after years. Before leaving, he said, "I come from the palace of the king, but peace I found only here. Where does this fragrance come from?" Zahra replied, "It comes from the sand. That which endures with patience turns into perfume." Years later, when that traveler became king, he built a palace and named it the Palace of Patience and Fragrance. They say even today the same scent lingers there, and when the wind blows, someone softly whispers, "Zahra is still smiling." Thousands of years ago, by the Nile, there was a city, Dahrin. It was the place where, in the name of the sun god Ra, light was kindled every morning in the temple. In the center of the city lived a young priestess, Naira. They said Naira's face was bright as the moon, and her eyes deep as the Nile. One day, Pharaoh's soldiers brought a prisoner, a sculptor accused of carving a human face on the god's statue. Naira looked at him, her heart stopped for a moment. The prisoner said, "I didn't carve the god's face. I carved the face of my dream. That face is yours." Hearing this, Naira trembled. Pharaoh ordered his death, but that night a storm came. Lightning struck the temple, and the statue of the god broke. In the morning, when people entered, they saw, inside the statue was carved a heart, and in the center of it was an inscription, "Love is not greater than the gods, but it is their reflection." Naira disappeared. People said she drifted away with the Nile, but every full moon on the riverbank in the moonlight, a shadow appears, holding a glowing chisel as if still carving, and that city was named Dahrin, which means beyond time. For there, love had defeated even time. In a war-torn village of Bosnia, Mostar, lived an old muezzin, Yusuf Aga. The war had taken everything, the mosque's roof, his sons, and even his hearing. A bomb explosion had made him deaf. Yet every evening he stood on the prayer mat, faced the Qibla, and moved his lips as if giving the call to prayer. People asked, "Aga, you can't hear, then why call the azan?" He smiled and said, "I cannot hear, but my Lord can." One snowy night, the village children sat around him. Yusuf Aga closed his eyes, raised his hands, and for the first time, the whole village heard a faint sound, as if the azan echoed through the air. Everyone said, "That was Aga's voice, not from earth, but from the sky." Since that day, whenever it snows in that Bosnian village, people say Aga is calling the azan again. A little away from Paris, there was a small village, Montluer. The village was famous for its old café La Fleur, where a young girl, Emily, made coffee every evening. Her habit was, whenever it rained, she sat by the window and read old love letters found under the café tables. Those letters held people's dreams, separations, and promises. One day, an old man came, holding that same letter, the one he had once written in this café to his beloved, but left for war before giving it to her. Emily opened the letter. The ink was faded. The words read, "If you are reading this letter in the rain, know that I have returned." The old man smiled and said, "I have returned, but she is gone. You keep this café alive, because in every cup, someone's memory brews." After that day, on the café window was written, "This café revives love in the rain." And even today, when it rains in that Paris village, people drink coffee there and say, "Through Emily's window, old dreams can still be seen." In the Turkish city of Konya, there was a small village where a dervish lived, Salim Baba. Every night he walked through the streets with a lantern in his hand and placed one before every door. One day, a young man asked, "Baba, everyone's asleep. No one sees this light. Why do you light it?" Baba smiled and said, "I don't light it for the dark. I light it for hope." Years later, when Baba passed away, people saw. The lamps around his shrine lit themselves. Since that night, whenever someone's heart breaks in that village, people say, "Salim Baba's lantern still burns. You just need eyes that can see." In an ancient Iranian village, Shiraz, lived a blind poet, Dara. He never wrote on paper, only formed words in the air, and said, "My poetry can only be heard by those who have silence in their hearts." People thought he was mad. But one day, when a great storm struck the village, Dara faced the sky and recited a verse. And at that moment, the clouds split, rain poured down, as if nature itself had heard his words. After the rain stopped, a voice was heard from the earth. "Dara, your poetry is written on hearts today, not on paper." Since that day, poets of Shiraz say, "He who speaks from the heart, his words never die." Near the Spanish city of Granada, there was an old village where every building was made of red bricks. People called it the Red Street. There lived an old painter, Isabella. Every day she painted the same scene, a street with sunlight falling on red walls. One day a girl asked, "Why do you paint the same scene every day?" Isabella said, "I'm waiting for my husband, who left through this street. When I get the colors right, he will return." Years later, when she died, people saw her last canvas. For the first time, at the end of the street, a shadow was visible. When someone touched the painting, it felt the color was still wet. Even today, at sunset, that street truly turns red, as if love is still breathing inside a painting.